All right, so the next step is to make the shaft. The next and final step is to make the shaft, but that's a bit tricky. So all of this has to be assembled before I can do that, because I need to figure out what the total length is. And the shaft needs to have a woodruff key cut in both sides, as well as being pinned through. They were really concerned about this thing potentially slipping, which is just amazing. No, it looks like the top is just pinned. So what we need, and the order of operation is very important, because this part actually fits all the way inside this piece, which means this piece has to be pressed in first. This sleeve here has to be pushed in first. So I'm going to push that in. Then I am going to do the interference fit, press that guy on, and maybe I'll heat this guy up so I can just slide it on, because it's only a few tenths. I don't need to be worried about this guy or this guy right now, because they can go on anytime. They've just got to be welded on, and they don't actually affect anything else. I could have used this potentially. Oh, and this height is not critical. So what I can do is I can get my shaft length just a little bit long, and then remove just a tiny bit of material off this piece to make the make my shaft length just a tiny bit short, and then remove a little material off this till I've got a very close fit, because in reality the length above this bottom part doesn't matter. This flange height will be adjusted so that it perfectly fits to mount this part, which goes down by the camshaft in the engine, and it's going to come up here, and this piece here that slides down is what mounts this whole thing to the engine assembly. So he's going to set this height and then weld it in place. So I don't have to worry about that. But the shaft length, since it has this gear, I believe this gear on this end, like this, and the top part has this, the shaft, which is pin and keyed, has to be very close to accurate, which is going to be a little bit challenging. So we're going to try and see how close we can get. But if I make the shaft just a tiny bit short, then I can always remove just a little bit of material off the top of this guy, relieve that a little bit more, take some material off the top of this guy. Any one of those solutions would help make the shaft fit right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to press this guy in. So to get this sleeve in there, all I did was grab this hammer and just tapped lightly, and it went in very smoothly. It's a pretty snug fit, which is good, and I got the top aligned so that the little nut sticks out just enough to catch the bronze bushing as well. These are a little gummed up, but now the bronze bushing is in there. And so the shaft will come up to the middle of this, so now this whole assembly can be put on here. And actually this washer needs to go on after. So next we have to get this guy, the interference fit, to go on. So I was going to heat this guy up and see if I could just slide it on. So I'm just going to take and heat this guy up. And I only need to get it to like a couple hundred degrees. So we're about 180. So let's see how it fits. Oh, still a little snug. So once I heated this up, it slid on pretty nicely, and I took it over the hydraulic press and just pushed it down, because it cooled off pretty quickly too. And I just slid it down. It went on very smoothly, and I believe concentrically. It looks like it's nicely aligned, and it's actually on there. I'm not sure he's going to have to do much to weld this at all, because this piece is really on there. Okay, so now I got to get this washer lined up and put on the bottom, and then this assembly slides down on top of it. This part goes on the bottom of the distributor like this. This part seats down inside, and this part rubs on one of these brass bushings here, and so that all seats inside. So Next step is to get one of these washers lined up and sitting flat on the bottom. They got some burrs turned up here, so I'm going to clean those up with a file. All right, once I got the washer in there, the washer was a little bit worn, so it was a little bit thinner than it should have been. So I had to get a piece of steel and tap that center bushing down, because the center bushing is not supposed to stick up above the washer, because you want to ride on the washer, not the bushing. Once I do get the final shaft diameter, I got to take everything apart again, and I've got to take like 10,000ths off a whole section so oil can get up. That's kind of essential, because down here, this oil goes in here and lubricates the shaft all the way up. I've got the the bronze bushing in there, and this is the piece that rides on it that interfaces with the shaft, right? And because this is a specific distance, I mean, this has to be here. What I'm going to have to do is, and I can't get to it, I'm going to have to mount the shaft on this part first. So that means I'm going to tap this guy on the end of the, oops, oh man. I'm going to tap this guy on the end of the shaft, like so, and I'm going to cross drill and tap, and cross drill, not in tap, but cross drill and pin, and then I can figure out the length on the other side. Then, to get this whole bit mated up and down when I'm done, which is interesting that they didn't center these keys. This only fits one way, which is kind of neat. See, that's eccentric there. Flip it 180 and it's centered. So that's pretty cool. So this whole assembly fits with this, and that's a separate fit job. That will be removing material off here. I kind of had it the wrong way. We're going to mount this guy on the shaft, this guy on the shaft, put it in here, and figure out what the length is that it needs to be to mate up perfectly on this side. On this side, it gets another bronze bushing on the bottom here, like so. Just sort of hand tapping it. Boy, it's kind of worn. It'd be nice to have a new one. But in any case, so the bronze bushing goes on there, and then this just rides flush up against that. And we need the shaft to go through here and mate on the bottom of this guy, and then we've got to drill this one, cross drill this one, and it needs a key, and it looks like the key, a Woodruff key at 90 degrees. It's hard to imagine it needs that. The original, this whole thing drove a gear assembly that fed two different distributors, so I could see why they want it to be a bit stiffer, but this doesn't seem like it really should need it. Although I guess this whole thing has to accelerate with the speed of the engine at the rate of acceleration of the engine, so there's probably quite a decent amount of force on there. We got to figure out the Woodruff key and then cross drill this guy. And once we've got that done, then we can turn this guy back around and adjust this height here so that this piece meshes appropriately with this guy here. And I'm going to assume that a little bit of slop, a little bit of latitude in here would be okay for this key could be a little bit up. Alrighty, so we're over here. And we need to cross drill this shaft with an existing pinhole on here. And there's a couple of complications for this. One side of one hole is opened up about 4,000ths more than the other side, which means I guess it rotated a little bit in there. It didn't damage the other side too much, which is kind of interesting. Let me tell you how I found a way to line this up dead on where I need it, because there's two holes. This goes all the way through. So the first thing I did was I found dead center between this thing clamped in the vise, and found the dead center so that I knew it was on the center line. Then I got a pin that's the same size as the smaller hole, which is on the opposite side, and then I rotated this guy until I could go all the way through and mate perfectly on the opposite side like that. And on the top I tried to make sure I had equal gap on both sides. Now what I need to do is I need to take this guy and get it to go all the way, seat all the way down at this end. And in order to do that, except it's got to go in this side. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to grab something like a seat clamp or something and squeeze this in. The neck is, it's all the way up against the shoulder here. Shoulder's all the way up against the edge of the vise. Maybe I can gently tap it all the way in. It's a pretty big lever arm. I don't like the fact that it was, it's a little bit of motion. I didn't want to over clamp this either. course, now that I'm all the way in, I can't tell if the pin is lining up with the other side perfectly, which may make me repeat this exercise again, unfortunately. Okie doke, so we've got this all lined up here, and we've got a very small center drill in place. And we're going to drill very gently to see if we can do our best to get a good hole in this guy. This is a .155 pin, and it's supposed to be, the hole's supposed to be 1,000th under that, and it is, because I can't get quite started, just almost does. All right, so I made a temporary pin out of the next larger size on my surface grinder. That was a little problematic. I tried to do the whole thing at once, and this is too much stick out to really even do like 1/1000th a pass. It was sort of bouncing against the wheel a little bit, everything from about 1/2 inch on. So that didn't work out too well, but I ended up making a pin that's pretty snug. So this guy's in there. So this guy fits against the bronze bushing in there. And it needs to go all the way in. I need to make sure I have the bronze bushing on this side. Like so. Then I took my calipers and measured right along the groove in here. Found the depth, and I came up with 1.15 should be enough. It's a little bit past this pin here. So the pin just holds in place. All the force should be on the Woodruff key that's going to be put in the shaft. So I need to figure out where to cut the shaft off. So I found that distance. Then I measured. I put some dicum along this. Used my calipers to score along the dicum. Now I'm going to take this over to the lathe. I'm just going to part it off right here. So there's two operations on the end of this shaft to mount the shaft to this gear. One is to drill a cross hole, and the other is to put a Woodruff key, cut a relief for a Woodruff key with a Woodruff key cutter. And it turns out it's a Woodruff key number 5, and the cutter is a 405. But the order of operations is kind of important because the pin is perpendicular to the Woodruff key, which means that I have to do the Woodruff key first, or it's going to be challenging to cut it later. That will make aligning it kind of difficult. It's just, I'm sure in the factory they either had a jig or they drilled the cross hole after the Woodruff key was in. So we're going to see if we can get this done. I don't have any specs. It's exactly where it should be. So we're going to put the Woodruff key fairly close to the end over here. So we've got the rod mounted in the vise. So on one side I have a parallel, which is just keeping this guy parallel with the bottom of the vise. And then I have a angle block in here pressing against it, so I get 3 points, because I don't know how much force is going to take, but I'm pushing into the fixed vise. So first I'm finding my end point here, and that'll tell me how far over I need to go, but I also need to take the cutter on top and on bottom of this to find center. And we're going to do that next in the Z-axis. So I decided to use the paper method, which is about right here, and this paper is 3.2 thousandths. So now I can shift off 3.2 thousandths for the thickness of the paper, and then we need to go half the cutter thickness, which will put the center line of the cutter right along the top, and that's 0.0625. It's exactly 1/8. And now the center line of the cutter is right along the tangent point at the top of that arc, and then I've got to go half the diameter. Well, I did sand this down, so what I need to do is I need to measure it right where I'm going to do the cutting so that I can get this fairly close. Okay, so I need to go down 3.115. All right, so I've got everything locked off. This should be right where I want it. And I have never cut one of these before, so I should make sure the vise is decently snugged on this. I almost made the mistake of cutting the key at the end here because I wanted it to be right at the outside, but remember, this part slides all the way in until this end is back up in here, so the key has to be inset. So I think we should be good right here. And just looking, visualizing just to verify, it looks like we're halfway. I've locked off my Z, I've locked off my X, which are the two that I've got to worry about. The Y is what I'll be using to plunge this cutter in, and we're going to run really slowly. I don't really know what to expect, so. Wow, it seems like it's cutting really easily. This is 4340 bar stock, so it's pretty strong stuff. It's chrome moly. It's stronger than 4140, which is more common. But it really is cutting it like butter. I'm not sure how far to go in, so I'm going to set my Y 0 and I'm going to back out and do a test fit. Kind of looks like it needs to go in a little bit further, so we're going to do a little bit more and be right back. That seems like it should be pretty good. And a test fit reveals that we are good. That is a really nice tight fit. That'll be perfect. So now we can tap this guy on and we can drill the pin. All right, to drill this guy, I've got a crazy setup here. So I figured the gear was symmetrical about the center of the shaft. It should be very close. So I set my Y, found my Y, middle of the Y between these two jaws of the vise. And then I brought the X in till this lined up more or less, then rotated the the gear until it was lined up perfectly, tightened down the vertex vise, and now this goes in. I might need to tweak my X a little so this vise on the outside is pushing on a bar on this side that squeezes these two ends together, and I think that screwed up my X just a little bit here. Okay, so it's about 2/1000ths off. So when I squeezed this together, it took about 2/1000ths of play out. I made sure to have all of my appropriate bronze bushings in there, and now we're just going to try and drill this guy. And I'm going to drill and ream it, and we're going to do it in steps. So we are going to start with the center drill again. There's the pin in place. I didn't knock it all the way in, and by the way, this vise is on a spacer I made to line it up with the same height as the Kurt vise, although I wasn't using that feature of it right now. So this is a little bit snug, but it's going to wear in nicely. It might be a little bit difficult for him to assemble. He's going to have to squeeze these two ends together to assemble it, but should work out fine, and the bronze is going to wear in nicely. That way it'll make good contact with the bearing surface. So now I've just got to knock the pins out of both sides and relieve the center of the shaft, and that'll be this part done. Alrighty, next up, we need to relieve this about 10/1000ths here, and that'll let oil come up on both sides through the hollow center. And I may not have shown this, but this part's down the crankcase and oil can go in here, and that'll be somewhere up here, so oil can get in here under pressure and then squeeze out both sides to oil the bronze bushings. So we're just going to take it in about 10/1000ths total. And that would be that. All right, so we can try the final assembly here, which is kind of exciting. So this guy goes in here. It's going to be kind of interesting to try and line it up because I made it a pretty snug fit. That is one tight fit in there. Alrighty, so I'm not pushing this pin all the way in because I want him to be able to take it out if he needs to, and it'll make it easier if there's a place for the pin to go, you know, the pin punch, the drift punch to go. So I'm going to leave it almost all the way in. It won't touch anything inside here, so that shouldn't be a problem. The bronze bushing's already inside, so we're going to feed this guy through here. And now the question will be whether I can align this guy up or not. I had to relieve the key a little bit because the key, my measurements might have been off a tiny bit originally, but it seemed like the key might actually run into the washer here, so I just relieved it a tiny amount. And I may need to go get the C-clamp to do this properly. I'm going to give him this piece so that you have something to tap against when you're trying to tap the oops, other way. I'm trying to tap the gear on. Okay, let's try that one more time. There we go. That was a nice fit. And actually this hole lines up pretty well. Oh, it's a little, yeah, it looks like it's a little loose. So it looks like I will need my C-clamp in order to put this pin in. Oh yeah, just a little bit of squeeze, lines right up. I think I'm going to put the longer pin in here so it's easier for him to remove. And I'm not going to put it in all the way, but I have a proper length pin there. So once you do that, it fits really nicely. Okay. Last but not least, the mounting flange goes down here, which he will adjust based on the top of the engine. And then this guy will sit here. And this spacer should mate up with this guy exactly. Once I get this lined up, and there you go. And then over here, there'll be two clamps that hold this down. He's actually going to use this distributor over here, but I needed the spacing for this one here, so we should be good to go. Project complete. One of the harder things I've ever done, but very satisfying. Thanks for watching. Hope you find it useful. Hope to see you next time.